This presentation is a production of the Iowa State Bar Association with assistance from the Iowa State Bar Association Foundation, the Young Lawyers Division, and the Iowa State Bar Association Center for Law and Civic Education. Closing argument is the opportunity for the student attorneys to gather the evidence they presented during their cases in chief and then present cogent reasons why their cause should prevail. It is indeed argument. Unlike opening statement, a closing argument requires the student attorney to persuasively tell the judges why his or her case is the more meritorious. The student attorney takes the facts and applies the law, and then urges the judges hearing the case to find in his or her favor. A successful closing argument is going to return to the opening statement. It will reassert the theme of the case. A well-organized closing argument will recall for the judges the facts, the issues, and the parties. This will help to reinforce for the judges the evidence that they have heard. A good close will recap the favorable evidence and downplay the evidence that does not support the proponent's case. A good close will take the positive facts and relate them to the law of the case. A good closing argument will be persuasive. It will give the judges cause to stop and to consider the information provided, and it will give the judges solid reasons to find in the proponent's favor. Each side is allowed 8 minutes for closing argument. It's essential that the time be used wisely to present to the judges reasons why the student attorney's case should prevail.
First of all, I'd like to thank the judges for taking the time to listen to our case today. Shakespeare once said, "So rash, so young, they say never live long." Unfortunately, this is the case for Ricardo Bromista. His actions point to comparative negligence, which is the key element of law in this case. Comparative negligence was proven through 4 claims, which I will discuss later in my closing. The plaintiff tried to prove that Ms. Claudia Dana alone was negligent. The first defense witness we heard from today was Ms. Claudia Dana, the defendant. She told us how she hired Officer Schultz, a guard, from a very respected security outfit. This guard worked from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. every single day, from the very beginning of deconstruction to the last. She also told us about another safety precaution, an 8-foot fence. The second defense witness was Officer Mark Schultz. He also confirmed that the park was watched 24/7. He was on shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., and the demolition crew was there the rest of the time. There was always someone watching the park. The last witness we heard from today was Mr. Ross Krantz. He told us about Mr. Bromista's nature. He tried to get Mr. Krantz to do all sorts of risky things like base jumping and climbing the flying buttress. It even scared Mr. Krantz a little. Mr. Krantz also told us how Ms. Shaw told him that she and Mr. Bromista had been drinking and smoking before Mr. Bromista fell off the balcony that night. Beginning with the plaintiff witnesses, we have Ms. Ray Shaw. She also told us about Mr. Bromista's nature. So now, Your Honor, we have 2 people who can testify that Mr. Bromista base jumped and skydove. Would a man like this hesitate to climb a roller coaster? Ms. Shaw also stated that Mr. Bromista fell on grass and dirt. And then we found out about her relationship with Mr. Bromista. They were, quote, best friends. Would you rather have your best friend be remembered as a victim of someone else's negligence? Or would you rather have people find out that he fell from the balcony in a drunken state? And lastly, we found that no one can place Ms. Shaw and Mr. Bromista at the park that night. Another plaintiff witness was Dr. Teeds. Dr. Teeds testified that Mr. Bromista was drunk. We have exhibits showing his alcohol level at a 0.09. We also have exhibits saying that he fell on gravel and or pavement. Where would gravel and pavement be, you ask? On the parking lot, under the balcony, at the party. Dr. Teeds even had 4 acquaintances who claimed they fell off the roller coaster. Bias? Yes. Another plaintiff witness was Miss Dale Small. One of the first things we learned about Miss Small is that she is still affected by her husband's death. Year after year, she goes back to see him. She even claims that he talked to her. Her husband, who died in 1955. That's roughly 50 years ago, Your Honor. How can we trust this witness's credibility? How can we trust that she heard voices and later scream, when she also claims to see her dead husband's ghost every year? Plaintiff themselves even made a joke about her seeing the ghost. If they can't take their own witness seriously, how can we? And lastly, we learned about Miss Small's drinking problem. In fact, that's why Miss Dana finally had to fire her. How do you decide the outcome? Ask yourself, do you find that Ricardo Romista was injured at the Prince Denmark Park on October 31st, 2001? First of all, we have Mr. Krantz, who states that he saw them at the party and drove them to the hospital. Ask yourself, who can place Miss Shaw and Miss Romista at the park that night? No one. Can you believe Miss Small, a woman who sees her dead husband's ghost on Halloween night? And finally, the most convincing point. The ER report stated that Miss Romista fell on gravel and or pavement. If he had fallen off the roller coaster, would he have fallen into gravel or pavement? No. But if he had fallen off the balcony, would he have fallen into gravel or pavement? Absolutely. All this adds up to a no. However, if you still think yes to this first question, the second question you need to ask yourself is, do you find that Ricardo Romista acted negligently, approximately causing the October 31st accident? To prove this, we, the defense, had to prove 4 points. Mr. Romista knew the risk was present. We know he knew because Ms. Shaw testifies that he went to the park before they were supposed to go, saw that the safety rails were gone, and that most of the lighting was gone as well. He also knew that demolition was in progress and almost done. It is safe to say that Mr. Romista knew that falling from a roller coaster would seriously injure him if it did not kill him. Nevertheless, Mr. Romista took that risk unreasonably, freely, and voluntarily, and according to Ms. Shaw, was very excited about it. And finally, we had to prove that the plaintiff's assumption of the risk was the proximate cause of the plaintiff's damage. We know that, either way, Mr. Romista was drunk and fell off from some height in the air. He chose to get drunk, and he chose to supposedly climb the roller coaster. No one is to blame but him. All this adds up to a yes. If you are still deciding who is negligent, you should ask yourself, do you find that the defendant acted negligently, approximately causing the October 31st accident to decedent Romista? To prove this, the plaintiff had to prove 6 points. Miss Claudia Dana got a guard from one of the most respected security outfits in the Midwest. She had the park watched 24 hours a day. She had a fence that exceeded building code requirements. And this fence had to be locked and unlocked. That sounds like a lot of safety precautions to me. The fence was 8 feet tall. It didn't just meet building code requirements, it exceeded them. By the time Mr. Romista supposedly got to the roller coaster, the flying buttress was being taken down the next day. The safety rails had to come down sometime. Ms. Shaw states that Mr. Romista said that most of the lights were gone. That means that there were some left. Miss Dana had the park watched 24 hours a day. And finally, plaintiff had to prove that Miss Dana was grossly negligent in failing to dismantle the roller coaster in a safe and timely manner. Miss Dana didn't even use the extension that the demolition company tried to give her. She just followed their schedule. All this adds up to a no. The plaintiff has the burden of proof. They must prove, through a preponderance of evidence, that my client is guilty of negligence. They have not met that burden. This is a case of contradictions. Who are you going to believe? A best friend? An old woman who's lost touch with reality? A biased expert? Or would you believe a conscientious park owner, a security guard, a fellow classmate? Mr. Romista was a young, rash man who made the decision to drink that night, which ultimately caused his life to end too soon. Thank you.
A key fact to remember in closing argument is the student attorney representing the plaintiff or prosecution must reserve any remaining time to present rebuttal to the opponent's closing argument. If this is not done, rebuttal will not be allowed. A well-organized and presented closing argument demands passion and persuasiveness on the part of the student attorney. As an opening statement, a closing argument that is presented without notes or with minimal reference to notes should be scored higher than a closing argument which is read from a script. Also, the student attorney may use demonstrative evidence to reinforce the closing argument, but again, it may be no larger than 24 by 36 inches. Closing argument brings the mock trial to a close. It's now the time when the judges tally their votes, and then the judges will discuss their impressions of the presentations with each team.